Hi, welcome to our How to Combat Ransomware webinar. This will be a joint presentation between Brennan IT and Sophos. Next. Just to kick off some housekeeping. If you have any questions, there's like a question box in the app, in the GoToWebinar app. Just type your questions into that box, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation, either on the spot or we'll take it on notice and get back to you. Next slide. So my name's Dale Wilson. I'm the CEO of Brennan IT. Myself and George Alexandridis, who's an Endpoint security specialist for Sophos, are going to take you through the agenda and the presentation today. We'll cover off the sort of threat landscape, the endpoint security as it stands today, what mitigating steps can you take, and then what the Brennan IT sort of value prop and security guarantee is on top of that. And then we'll do some Q&A. Next slide. And that's actually, I'm going to hand over to George Alexandridis now to take us through the Sophos component.
Thank you, Dale, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. Today we're going to look at a brief look back at the State of Endpoint Security report, which shows how the threat landscape is changing and showing how threats such as ransomware that are sophisticated attacks are normal for attackers to use. On top of that, we will touch base on looking at CryptoGuard and the anti-exploit on how Intercept X version 2 has introduced deep learning and active adversary protection to prevent fileless malware attacks. The key takeaway here today, ladies and gentlemen, is the Intercept X solution brief, a few other white papers such as Exploit Explained, which gives you an understanding of all the exploits that are out there that Sophos detects and protects against, and of course the State of Endpoint Security survey. Next, please. Great. Before we start off, let's have a quick look at how attacks can occur. Most cyber attacks involves criminals exploiting some sort of security weakness within applications that your users do or access on a day-to-day basis. Those weaknesses could be down to a poorly chosen password, a user who falls for a fake logging link, or an attachment that someone opened without thinking. Software bugs can be exploited in this way, and they are known as vulnerabilities. And for obvious reasons, they can take many forms as well. Sophos, with its endpoint protection and next-generation technologies, denies attackers by blocking the exploit and techniques used to distribute not just the malware, but also steal your credentials or even try to attempt to escape detection. This allows Sophos to ward off evasive hackers and zero-day attacks in your network. And we'll definitely talk more about this during the session. Next, please. Now, before we get into the more extensive stuff of today's session, I thought I'd just throw out there and just get a bit of a recap of what ransomware is. As we're probably all aware, ransomware is a form of malware that encrypts not just your files, but also your boot volumes, and holding you to a ransom to get your files back, or of course the boot volume now that we've seen with Petra. This is potentially crippling to a business. Think about the damages or loss of the business you'd experience if you were locked out of everything. Now, ransomware is not new. We first saw the initial ransomware infection in 1989, and believe it or not, it was a bootloader attack that locked you out of your computer. At that time, there was no onion network or even cryptocurrency to keep the anonymity, and the culprit was actually quickly captured or apprehended, I would say. 2013, CryptoLocker appeared, which was the first popular strain of ransomware. CryptoLocker earned lucrative money for the authors. And as the time went by, we saw a huge amount of variants or copycats, if we can call them, to try and earn the similar money. The ransom demands have traditionally been affordable to entice people to pay. However, if the ransom was thousands of dollars, many more users are likely to be willing to part with their information. However, in saying that, there's been reported cases that in targeted ransomware instances, malicious actors have opted to demand a ransom based on the company's estimated or published earnings. The technology for delivering the ransomware and other malware is constantly changing. We first saw a resurgence in macro-enabled Word documents, JavaScripts, and batch, and creative techniques with double extensions. In the latest popular variants that we've made the news, especially WannaCries and the patches, we've seen the use of using exploits so they're able to self-replicate based on known application vulnerabilities. What's coming up as a rising threat is crypto mining and crypto jacking. Some are still divided in the legitimacy, yet it's starting to propagate far and wide. Where breaches of systems resulted in ransomware payloads instead of the crook silently using your resources to mine the cryptocurrency they seek. Next, please. The threat landscape has also shifted from known threats to unknown threats, making defenders' jobs harder and harder. In order to stay a step ahead, new approaches are needed. Years ago, the primary form of attacks was what we now call generic malware, and which today only makes up 12% of cyber attacks. And as you can see up on the screen there, it's on your left-hand side. This is a category that is well covered by the traditional anti-malware. So if you've got basic antivirus deployed, congratulations. You're all set against 12% of malware that is coming after you. As we look at the other 88%, we see ransomware and what we call advanced malware on the rise. Now, to give you some statistics, 54% of organizations in 2017 were hit by ransomware, and on average twice. And it's no fun to be hit by ransomware. Well, a lot of people will tell you if they've been hit. Advanced malware includes now zero-day multi-stage attacks, and this category has also grown exponentially over the years. To give you some examples of advanced malware, it's the WannaCry and patches. I just happen to have that ransomware payload. And of course, not to forget, and how does most of this get in? Well, your emails and web-based malware is also on the rise. What our industry calls exploits are becoming more and more prevalent across many of these categories, especially among the top 4 categories that you see on this chart. Key one is exploit vulnerabilities is one of the fastest growing tactics among cyber criminals, and one of the primary reasons so many organizations turn to Intercept X, which is Sophos' next generation detection. The Intercept X is a particularly effective or is effective by stopping all forms of ransomware and exploit attacks, and that's because of the technology that we've built in, the anti-exploit technology, the CryptoGuard technology, and of course, moving on to that is the deep learning and so forth. Now, to round off the chart itself, we're also seeing cryptocurrency, which we touched base on just slightly in the previous slide. Now, cryptocurrency mining now makes up 8% of all the threats that we see. When a cryptocurrency miner gains unauthorized access to your system, it consumes power and CPU cycles to mine its cryptocurrencies. And of course, if you've got multiple machines in the network, utilized as such, it can bring your system down to its knees. That's why we've given the rise of these operations, we no longer categorize these apps as potentially unwanted applications, or PUAs as we call them, but now we're categorizing them as malware. And finally, just at the top, we're also seeing privilege escalations. on the rise as more and more hackers are trying to steal credentials to gain privileged access to maliciously traverse your network. With how the threats have evolved, that's why, again, we've created Intercept X. And the newest version of Intercept X that we have released today is ideally suited to defend against today and tomorrow threats. It's relatively easy for a cybersecurity company or a product to protect against known or yesterday attacks, but what's needed is technology that can defend against previously unseen malware and even against malware that has not yet been developed. This is a concept that we call predictive security, and this is where we start talking about introducing the machine learning of what Sophos tends to use, or what we use basically is a subset of that called deep learning, which is looking at the neural network and being able to have a smaller model and feed the model not just from Sophos Labs, but also from VirusTotal. Next, please. Okay. In saying all this, the State of Security survey taught us that ransomware is still a big problem. On average, of the respondents who said they had been affected by ransomware, they had actually been hit twice. If anything, of all the data that we received back, it shows that threats are becoming very diverse in their targets, timing, and complexity to ensure they catch people off guard. And the complexity of these threats, let's call them next generation threats, are just the normal threats. Now, this white paper that I'm talking about can be found, which is the State of Endpoint Security white paper, can be downloaded off our website, www.sophos.com. Now, without going over all the contents of that document, the biggest fear that I have with the data in the report is that businesses are not prepared to defend against these sophisticated attacks. Third-party testing has proved that standard antivirus and anti-malware products are not enough to detect and suppress these attacks. Businesses now need to keep up with the bad guys and complement their traditional protection with exploit mitigation techniques, specific ransomware protection, and unknown payload blocking. Ransomware is also being franchised, and you would have seen it in the newspapers, in articles, where ransomware is as a service. Mind you, people go online, purchase these payloads or exploits, and then send out the attacks. What some people don't know about that is that if someone doesn't get this payload attack correct, they can call up a particular help desk of this franchise and be able to work around with the help desk team and get it solved and actually have it executed. Again, more origins of ransomware than ever before. And the usage of exploitation techniques, assuming and hoping that you don't have your operating system and third-party applications updated or even patched so that their payloads will simply just run, is now common. How many people do patch their systems and ensure that they're not being exploited? Again, our survey proved this is a very possible in the real world. Next, please. I thought I'd put this in to give you an estimated understanding of what the total cost of ransomware attack would cost in Australia. As you can see there, I won't go into too much details with it. Most of it, the most common costs were around 17,000, of course, to 85,000 K, which took up 31% of it. But when the survey was given, the question was asked, what was the appropriate cost to your organization to rectify the impacts of the most recent ransomware attacks? Now, take this into consideration, guys. Considering downtime, people's time, device time, network cost times, loss of productivity, and of course, the ransomware paid. This gives you a clear indication of the amount of time and resources and what were taken into consideration for this attack. Next, please. What should you do about it? Well, for example, in the case of ransomware attacks or even exploit attacks, Intercept X would have blocked it before it was ever installed. It would have prevented it from running and, of course, stopped it from encrypting files. Another, in 2017, again, going back to what I previously said earlier, we saw a big ransomware news such as, the WannaCries or the NotPetya outbreaks. Just to give you some stats, with the NotPetya or Petya attack, it cost companies like FedEx and Merck over $400 million. Now, before we even discuss the benefits of anti-exploit and vulnerability mitigation, the traditional anti-malware product from Sophos, which is the Endpoint Protection Advanced, has some capabilities in stopping the delivery from the very first web request made to known or low reputation websites. With the addition of Intercept X, being able to suppress the exploitation techniques used within weaponized documents such as Word, PDF, and Excel that leveraged unknown and unpatched vulnerabilities can prevent the delivery of unknown payloads before they even have a chance to touch your systems. This is where many traditional anti-malware programs that haven't evolved fail to prevent. But, however, in looking at that execution part, what if something did manage to make it to the file system or was built into memory and was destined to be executed, either interactively or automatically? Unknown executable payloads are a big problem, and the survey discovered this fact, that it is becoming harder to block new and yet to be seen malware payloads. This is a typical attestation from a regular anti-malware user. As such, Intercept X deep learning, which is as I spoke earlier, the subset of machine learning has evolved, comes into play to categorize the executable contents before it hands it over to runtime. Using a highly efficient machine learning model with the lowest false positive rate and highest conviction rate against brand new unknown malware, we can detect and block anything malicious or potentially unwanted. And this includes not just executables, but PUAs as well, potentially unwanted applications. And finally, however, Sophos doesn't stop protecting after runtime. Post-execution capabilities within Sophos have been a long-time feature. Examples are application control, data control, behavior monitoring, to name a few. And specific to the ransomware threat, CryptoGuard provides post-execution monitoring of suspicious mass files interaction that results in plain text files being cryptographically altered. If such an event happens, not only is any further malicious encryption halted, any files previously scrambled are reverted back to their previous plain text and available state. CryptoGuard is highly effective against all forms of ransomware, both known and unknown as well. Next, please. So I've thrown everything up on the screen for you to have a look at. But the key takeaway here is to understand that our ability to detect never seen before malware shows why we're number one in malware detection. The sources are there from Sophos Labs using real-world time files found in the wild. Not only that, but just keep in mind when we talk about deep learning or machine learning, as I said earlier, we also take samples from VirusTotal. The next question that you probably have in your minds is, does it work? Indeed, our deep learning model is number one performing malware detection engine. The charts you're seeing is testing data captured over courses of several weeks. We took a batch of never seen before files and separated the good from the bad. On the left-hand side, we've got the y-axis. You can see the detection rate, and on the x-axis is the false positive rate, which is down the bottom on the right. In this chart as well, you'll be able to see that we want to be as high to the left as possible. That is perfect security of 100% detection rate with almost no false positives. And as you know, Perfect security doesn't exist. That said, that is the mark we're aiming for. Let's look at how traditional endpoint security fares, and which is there in the sort of left, yeah. These are your classic antivirus engines' ability to detect malware that they've never seen before. While there are additional methodologies that fill in the gaps, you can see as a pre-execution detection approach, these methods are only modestly effective. The gap in traditional approaches led to the rise of next-gen approaches. Here you can see that this new wave of approaches that were built in with machine learning at the core. Two things that jump out here. First, from a detection standpoint, machine learning is better than traditional approaches at detecting unknown malware. However, you can also see the false positive rate is higher, which is then the trade-off. When you look at Sophos compared to these approaches, you can see we're the best with a similar false positive rate to traditional approaches. We are still able to detect far more never seen before malware, more than other machine learning approaches, and way more than traditional endpoint security. Next, please. But having one specific detection and prevention technology is not going to serve you best now or into the future. Like threats have evolved, your security practices need to as well. If you stop a part of the attack chain, you can stop the attack. Fileless attacks do not get detected by traditional and file-based approaches. PowerShell, scripting hosts are inbuilt features of the Windows operating system that are actively being abused by threat actors. Fileless attacks do not rely on malware, but are still being blocked with Intercept X anti-exploit capabilities. Intercept X anti-exploit features stop attackers from dropping malicious executables. Malicious executables only account for 41% of malware that is delivered to the endpoint. And many techniques do not require a file to reach the machine storage. And again, a bit of stats again. 26% of malware-based attacks use weaponized Office files. Again, the Word documents, the PDF documents, and so forth. Next, please. Stopping malware threats have become harder over the last year. Malware threats have become increasingly complex over the last year as well. These survey answers are quite telling about the state of assuring protection within businesses. If businesses know threats are more complex and are harder to stop, and if on average you will be breached more than once, how can you idly sit by and wait for it to happen to you? And in many parts of the world, and if you guys are aware, the GDPR, which is known as the General Data Protection Regulation, and local mandatory breach notification schemes are coming into effect. Not only mandates that businesses do more to stop the attempts, but if businesses are seen to not attempt to do anything more than just stop attacks and breaches, could leave the business liable for fines and further sanctions. Next, please. Before I finish off, just a key recap. We're all targets. Don't think that malware, ransomware, or a hacker will simply leave you alone, or leave all of us alone, or that it won't happen to you. Opportunistic criminals will use whatever networks and resources they can get their hands on. Don't give them an easy way in. Defend yourself, your network, your information. Do not become another victim. Get educated. We have a great deal of resources on how to best defend you and your businesses against all forms of attacks, not just from an endpoint perspective, but from network, data protection, mobility, and even user awareness and training tools such as PhishThreat. And we can talk about that on another day. At the beginning of this presentation, I did mention the key aspects here are, downloading white papers, the Intercept X solution, Exploit Explained, and again, use those downloads to your benefit, or anti-ransomware kits for your own use within your business. And guys, invest now. Think about what would it cost you to clean up after a breach, ransomware attacks, or even a simple destruction of your system. And given the stats that I've given you earlier, remember, ransomware costs in Australia an average between 17,000 to 85,000 in Australian dollars. Now, what I'll do now is pass it on to Dale. So please, next.
Thanks, George. Yeah, so Brennan IT's approach to security is, we've basically got a multi-layer defense strategy. It combines, network security components, which is our firewalls, which have, your typical, zone-based policies on, stateful packet inspection, but then also for all the traffic that is passed through some type of policy, we then inspect that traffic with, and block it as necessary with IPS as well, intrusion prevention techniques. Our internet services are DDoS protected as well. So the upstream carriers themselves provide us with let's call it cleanish internet. Yeah, at least they stop the DDoS component of that. That's at the network layer. We've also got, our Mimecast products there, which do, email, anti-spam, antivirus, anti-phishing, anti-everything. It's basically a really good piece of software to protect your email. It integrates with Office 365 as well. So it works together with sort of Exchange Online in that Microsoft environment. And then the endpoint stuff, there's the stuff that George has discussed already around Intercept X. That's like the last line of defense. We've also got the endpoint protection by both Sophos and Fortinet. And obviously there's the, Windows Defender antivirus on the desktop as well. So the point is that there's like 6 different technologies that we wrap up together to provide you with a Brennan IT security guarantee, which is essentially, if you take all these services from us and you get breached, you get your money back. It's that simple, like as in the full wad. So it's, we're backing ourselves and backing these technologies. If you take the full stack, we'll provide you with security or your money back. That's our guarantee. Next slide, please. So why Brennan? Really, it's our sort of multi-layer defense strategy is geared to the ASD's Essential 8. So if you're not familiar with the Signals Directorate, have put together a list of the critical things that you should do, and there's actually about 35 controls that they recommend, but there's the top 8 that you just absolutely have to do. So we sort of align our products and services into that mix as well to make sure that we've covered all the bases to provide that multi-layer defense strategy. If anyone hasn't gone onto their website, I'd highly recommend you do that. It's also a mindset. We don't add on security to everything. It's embedded in all our products and services now. So everything we do is, we securely provision, we protect and defend. Not only do we provide availability, we provide security. Every product has a security flavor now attached to it as part of its base offering. We've also gone down the ISO path, so we're now ISO 27001 certified. That's been the case now for 2 years, and there's a whole bunch of policy and controls and standards that we need to follow to maintain that certification. We also do security consulting for companies that want to get ISO themselves. We can help assist in that process and sort of highlight if there's any gaps we notice around your policies, procedures, and processes. And that's in terms of the risk management. We also do a lot of consulting around sort of identifying your risks, your business risk, your security risk, the various sort of loss of IP style risks that you could potentially have. And we run a full consulting process around that, which is primarily, it's the combination of probability and impact. We'll then define, what you need to do about each one of these risks. We'll run through that as a process with our customers. And we partner with the best. So that's, we use a combination of, Juniper Networks, Fortinet, Sophos, and Microsoft primarily and Mimecast as our partners for our security functionality and guarantee. And they are the best at what they do, and we have full confidence in their products. Next slide. Okay, so we've concluded the presentation now, so we can start to go through the questions. So if there are any questions, type them into your app, and we'll read them out sort of anonymously if we can on the spot, or we'll get back to you. So the first questions come through is, why do you use Windows Defender and Sophos? Isn't Sophos sufficient? I'll hand this one to George, but I'll just say that you can never do too much, and if they work together, then there's no reason why you wouldn't do both. They actually do have different functions, but George can give a better answer on this one.
Thanks, Dale. Intercept X can work alongside a few other third-party products. If you do have Sophos Endpoint Advanced or Sophos Central Endpoint Advanced, there's no need to have Windows Defender, where you can have both the endpoint doing the traditional side of things and also the next generation. And yes, the answer is Sophos is sufficient in that aspect. Does that answer that question?
Okay, the next question is, what is the retention rate of Sophos clients? So that's one for you, George.
Okay, I think Asno has sent two. Might as well do both. Let's have a look at the second question as well. What is the percentage of Sophos clients being attacked and breached? Okay, so what we have seen with Intercept X, any customer currently running Intercept X, and to stress this out, this is where we split the traditional signature heuristics versus behavior and exploit technique. Now, given the fact that users, a number of companies, and especially Sophos themselves, when we position it to a customer, we both provide them with the Endpoint Advanced and also with Intercept X, and that gives them the capabilities of being able to then be able to monitor network shares, local file systems, USB drives, and be able to then analyze the processes that are coming in, and in the event of a process that's been hijacked and dropped out. And this is where CryptoGuard and comes in to protect against the WannaCry variants and the Petra variants. And then you've got the exploit techniques, where we look at the technique that's being embedded into the application that's trying to exploit a vulnerability at the application that you're immediately adding in. So to answer the question, it's zero, because we're not just defending on known attacks, but we're also doing zero-day attacks. So anyone that's running this Intercept X is fully protected against ransomware. And remember, this is all signatureless, so you can have Endpoint Advanced and the Intercept X, and all we're doing is basing it on behavior techniques. and so forth.
Okay, the next question was, with the money-back guarantee, what does that cover? For instance, if we had been using your products and we had a ransomware attack that ends up costing $80,000 to rectify, does Brennan cover that cost? So the answer is no, we don't cover that cost. That's consequential loss. It's not covered by our contracts. What we do cover is the cost of the service. So in other words, if you're paying, let's just say, $10,000 a month for all the various products and services to cover your security, including firewalls, the Sophos products, the Mimecast products. Let's say you've taken the full suite of services from us and it's costing $10,000 a month and you get breached, we'll give you the $10,000 a month back. If you get breached 3 times, and in other words, we've given you $30,000 back, you can then also choose to exit the contract with us. So it's 3 strikes and you're out clause. Next question was, are there any limitations across multiple Windows OSs? Are there any limitations on Windows Server 2008 R2? I'll hand that one to you, George.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. So when we talk about Intercept X, we are talking about the Windows desktops. For servers, we have the CryptoGuard technology embedded into the solution. So that would be Server Protection Advanced from Sophos. So pretty much the same thing as CryptoGuard, being able to access, look at or just take just-in-time snapshots of every file that's being accessed on a read and write. Look at the process that's attempting to do the encryption. Validate whether it's real good encryption or bad encryption, and then if it's bad, drop the process and alert the administrator and roll back things immediately. And that's what we're offering. The anti-exploit component is coming soon to Sophos Server Protection. Just watch that space.
Okay, the next question was, does Intercept X require much setup configuration, e.g. configuring log capture, etc.? That's another one for you, George.
Cool. Okay. Technically, the answer is no. You push out an agent. The agent will have the endpoint protection, depending on what the customer has purchased. If they've purchased the enterprise endpoint protection and an advanced, it's one agent doing everything, so there's no separate agents. And basically what will happen is every time there's an activity with malware, or whether it's a crypto locker attack or even an exploit attack, it will prompt the users, the administrator of this warning, and then provide the administrator with a full detailed root cause analysis of the attack. What machine was George on, the time and date, the username that was logged in, what files were about to be tampered with, was there any business files impacted in this, was there also registries and processes involved, and was it trying to communicate to a command and control server. And that will be articulated in a report document or even in a visualization outlining how the processes work, or how the process formed from one process to another to get to that point of attempt of an attack.
Okay, next one. In the event that a server has Sophos Advanced Protection and a client PC does not have protection, if the client gets a crypto virus, will the file share be protected against encryption?
As long as you've got Sophos Server Protection Advanced, it has the CryptoGuard technology, it should pick up and prevent it. Okay.
Next one is...
Sorry, Dale, let me just elaborate on that so people are aware. Intercept X will protect what happens onto the machine, on the endpoint, and Server Protection will pick up everything that happens and occurs on the server. In essence, it's best to have both. if, as the example here, as long as you've got server protection advanced with the CryptoGuard technology, it should detect and revert back.
Okay. Does Intercept X have any major impact on local workstation performance and or SharePoint Online performance? It's for you, George.
No, the answer is no. This is all signatureless technology. Back to you, Dale.
Okay. If there's any more, we'll wait maybe 30 seconds for any more questions to come up. Otherwise, we'll conclude the presentation. Okay, there's no more questions. Oh, sorry, there is one. Here we go. Sorry. How does crypto attack SharePoint Online documents? That's one for you, George.
Okay. As long as if there's a shared map access onto the system, and as I said, if the files are being read or written, we'll take just-in-time snapshots of those files and then be able to then revert them back.
So I think the question is actually, how does the attack occur? I think the answer is then, to your point, George, is that if the file share is available and the credentials of that workstation can access that file share, then so can the
yes.
or access file share.
That's correct. Absolutely. Again, with the technology of Intercept X version 2, which we have credential theft, stealing credentials will be hard for active adversaries to attempt to take off the network. Cool. Thanks, Dale.
Okay, we'll just wait another few seconds for any more questions. Okay, well, that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you.